This is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Hey guys, I'm Si. Welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show. It is Sunday night, so it's fight night here on the channel. Danny Batten Fight Show, powered by Violent Money. This is episode number 111, and please do go check out Violent Money TV on YouTube, as well as the products and apparel that they've got in store at www.violentmoney.co.uk, and we've got a 20% discount code, which you will see flashing below you at the moment, and it's in the description below. And we'll talk a bit more about them later. But we're live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter as always. And as you know, A.C.E Podcast Nation, you're home to many a great show and series featuring top guests, expert analysts, and more. So please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. It really helps us out a lot, helps us grow, and of course, drop a like on the video. If you prefer your podcast in audio form, then the Sports Social Podcast Network is the only place you will find all the content by A.C.E Podcast Nation, including this series. So do check them out and have a look. But a slight change in format, and I've just found out a slight change in show as well. So just as the opening credits were playing, our guest tonight, I knew there might be a problem. He's traveling back from Scotland. He's been mega delayed because of the weather. So he isn't going to be able to make it this week. Hopefully he'll be with us next week. I'm just going to wait on that. So we're guestless, but that's all right because we're not guestless. First and foremost, I have joining me former Cage Warriors champion, UK MMA legend, Mr. Danny Batten. How are you, mate? Okay? Yeah, all good. I'm raring to go. Looking forward to getting this one done. Yes, there's loads to talk about regardless, and I'm delighted to say that our first would have been our first guest of this evening, but now our only guest of this evening, so we don't have to worry too much about time from our end at least. But I'm delighted to welcome back our regular boxing pundit, a boxing trainer in his own right, and of course one of the great historians in British boxing, in my opinion. It is none other than Mr. Ben Doherty. How are you, mate?
I'm good. All the better for that introduction, Simon.
Yeah, well, I felt like you deserved a bit of a spruce to your introduction. I felt like I wasn't doing you justice in previous intros.
I think we've nailed it now.
Yes, indeed, mate. So I'm obviously a little bit disappointed that Chris Jenkins couldn't join us this evening. Can't be helped. Yeah. The weather's been horrific. Obviously, everyone knows that last couple of days, and he's traveling back from Scotland. So we had switched it around, so he was going to come on a bit later, but unfortunately, he just texted and said it's not going to happen. But hopefully, he'll be with us next week, or certainly in the very near future. I've got no doubt about that. But we got plenty to talk about anyway. So we're going to start with the boxing, and I suppose there's only one fight to begin with. Ben, Amir and Kell Brook finally happened after all these years. Did it disappoint?
I don't think it did. I'm sure it disappointed Amir Khan, but or anybody who had money on him. But I don't think it did disappoint the fans. No, I'm aware. What I'm aware of, everybody was very excited in the build-up. A lot of people, so many people were saying, "I don't care if it's too late. I just want to see it. It's exciting. You can't beat a good old domestic dust-up grudge match." it had been so long burning, simmering, you know. I think everybody caught fight fever in the week, the build up to it. Anyone who was around it, had friends who were involved either in the media or they had fighters on the bill, you know, etc. And I think, you know, I said to you just before we started, you couldn't call it a classic by any stretch. I know the Daily Mail attempted to call it a true classic today in their headline, but what it was kind of upbeat and quite exciting while it lasted, wasn't it? I mean, I think it was almost a mismatch. I think Kell Brook just looked so much better and more solid, had the better game plan, and had the most left of his former ring savvy and his kind of attributes and his gifts than Khan did. I think Khan had turned up that night to find the well had truly ran dry, but at the same time he was well compensated for it, wasn't he? You know, they both made big bucks, you know. And so no, I don't think it did disappoint. And you know what? You can't say they ducked big challenges, either of them, regardless of the situation with each other, because they fought. You know, both fought Crawford, Khan fought Canelo, Brook fought Golovkin. So you can hardly say they were cherry pickers in that sense. And they did finally fight each other. I think it's fantastic closure for Kell Brook. Whether it will be closure or not in terms of whether he'll retire, do you know what? We spoke about that off camera too, and I doubt it. I would like to see him retire, but that's all right for me to say, isn't it? Because I don't have a financial, you know, interest in that, and I'm not really privy to that financial picture either. But I'd like to see him retire because I just think it's fantastic closure for Kell Brook. And it's so unusual for a fighter to get that opportunity to bow out on that kind of note when he's already past his best. And we've seen him have his arse handed to him a couple of times by you know, world-class elite fighters. It's so rare to get that fairy tale moment, your words, before we came on camera. Yeah. And, you know, with a big payday to send you off into the sunset, I just think it would be a fantastic ending for Kell Brook. Will it happen? I doubt it, to be honest with you, for the reasons we know, economic forces, that feeling that it's just too hard to leave when there's still money on the table. The idea there's always one more, you know, you mentioned Conor Benn and all the rest of it, but no, it didn't disappoint. It wasn't a farce. It wasn't a boring kind of long drawn out fight went the distance with few highlights. It had drama, you know. I do think it was quite one sided, but it didn't disappoint.
Yeah, I think it was one sided, but it was it was a good fight to watch, I'll say. I think with regards to Kell Brook, I completely agree with you. I think what an opportunity to go out with like a fairy tale ending. You beat your biggest rival. You beat someone who's got there was a genuine sort of dislike and grudge there. Yeah. You can go out with a convincing victory over him. But as we know, we've seen it so many times with all different fighters from both sides of the combat spectrum. Sometimes fighters don't always see it as the way as us as fans or people in the media. So it is what it is. I saw today on Instagram, there was a few posts floating around about a Conor Benn fight for Kell Brook. See, to me, I understand why Conor Benn would take that fight, because that is, it's a tremendous fight for him, tremendous opportunity. If he was able to beat Kell Brook, what a name to put on your list of accomplishments as you go to whatever he goes on to achieve. On the other hand, if Kell Brook was to lose that fight, it kind of takes the edge off a little bit what could have been a perfect ending. But in terms of the performance, I thought Kell Brook was outstanding, and I thought Amir Khan just looked a little bit lost.
He did.
Such is life, I suppose.
It was quite shocking from the outset, I thought. Literally in the first round, I thought, let's say Khan is obviously, he hadn't fought a very long time. He hadn't fought for getting on for 2.5 years, which cannot have helped him at that age. And I think, because somebody said to me on Facebook a little while ago, he must have known in training camp. But I think, and Danny might empathise with this, I think sometimes they don't know in training camp. I think it's under the lights when you get that discovery, when you realise, I haven't got it tonight. I mean, I've known fighters who said they felt great in training all the way through and felt really confident. And then they get in the ring and...
Ben's just broken up a little bit. Danny, how did you manage to watch the boxing from last night as well as all the MMA?
Oh, we lost you there, didn't we?
Oh, you're back. Yeah. You just broke up a bit, mate. You did.
Yeah, everything went black on all the screens. But Khan, no, he looked, as well as looking like his reflexes had gone and his timing had gone, and he looked more fragile than ever. When he got nailed with a shot. He was also exhibiting really novice-y kind of amateurisms that he used to exhibit quite a long time ago. I do remember Kell Brook when the fight was being talked about more relevant to the world boxing picture many years ago. I can't even remember how many years ago it was, but they were talking about the fight, possibility of the fight. And Kell Brook said he's still got that amateur in and out style. He says, I'm a pro. I've got a pro style. And it's true. And that's what it looked like last night. You look, it was just so bouncy. And it was like Khan, the only game plan he had was to circle like a lunatic both directions, trying to stay away from Brook, you know what I mean? And seeing if he could outbox him from that kind of range. But sometimes you can move too much, you know what I mean? It is possible to move too much, and you don't need to move that much, especially in 12-round kind of duration title fights. And Brook was just so much more economical, more sort of poised and balanced, and just so much better. I suspect it flattered him last night. The situation last night probably flattered Kell Brook, because I think against an elite light middleweight or middleweight, I think he'd be found wanting. But it did look to me like Kell Brook would always have beaten Amir Khan stylistically, because as much as Khan has obviously deteriorated, the kind of blueprint you could still see unfolded in that ring last night leads me to believe that we got the result that we may have always have gotten.
It is difficult, though, isn't it? Because you just don't know, if a peak Amir Khan can do anything differently. I felt like, although I got to be honest, there's been a couple of times over the years when Amir Khan's been knocked out, and I've thought, right, that's it, he's done. And then he has come back and done all right in a later fight. So, I mean, from that side of things, you kind of don't know. But I'm interested in what you thought, Danny. You've watched it. Like, it was a fight. It was a weird one. We kind of like almost, you were interested by it, but there was also this thing of like they've avoided each other probably for a few too many years. But it was a weird one. But did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I enjoyed watching it. I've never been a fan of Khan's style, personally. I think Ben really summed it up, really. He's always had that amateur look. I don't think he's ever shook that off. And I feel like the issue with his chin, which I think we would all agree, there's some kind of issue there. He's never had the greatest chin, but he did look almost more glass-like in there. He was running away practically, and each round it became more and more apparent that he was aware that he couldn't stay in the pocket in any way, shape or form. I wonder, whether, in training he was perhaps getting rocked easy and perhaps knew the state of, the situation with his fragile jaw. I don't know. It just looked like he didn't have confidence in there. And in regards with the in and out, the observation I made, I mean, whether I'm wrong, whether I'm right, was that Khan wasn't setting anything up. He was sort of jumping in the pocket, throwing off a set piece combination without really knowing whether anything was going to land. There was no setup, there was no gameplay. He was, heavy sparring.
This is the thing. Khan has never had the greatest ring IQ. And then once again, someone said last night, someone made that point last night in one of my threads, and someone else who was a good guy that I know in real life, and he was a good schoolboy boxer himself. He's one of them modest guys you don't know he did all this, but he was quite the young hotshot as a junior, as an amateur, before finding out life like many of us do. And he was saying, wow, he said, low, doesn't have any ring IQ. Wow, how do you become a world champion without any ring IQ? And I hear that, and sometimes maybe armchair fans are a little too quick to be dismissive with that kind of tone. But Khan, I don't care what he's achieved, and his achievements are massive. He doesn't have a great ring IQ. He is athletically gifted. He had incredible speed. He had great range. Brilliant combination punching and variety. He had balls the size of the Soviet army and a heart to match. But Khan is not very smart the way he goes about things. And I think a lot of it was kind of on instinct and athleticism that he achieved as much as he did right from as a teenager in the Olympics and everything else. Because, like you said, Danny, he was throwing shots. I mean, I call it hitting and hoping. I remember there was a trainer called Harry Andrews who trained my friend Darren Hamilton to the British title, and also trained a fighter called Larry Akindeo to some reasonable level of success. And he used to say, this is a little bit edgy what he'd say, this coupler, but he'd say, don't hit and hope, aim and maim. Now I don't really agree with the maim bit, but it rhymes. You got to give him a break on that a little bit. Right. But he would say, don't just hit and hope. And I remember in the amateurs when I was younger, when I thought it was all about hand speed and sexy movement and lots of footwork like a young Cassius Clay, etc., I remember not really thinking a lot about what you're going to throw, just throwing what you wanted to throw. And obviously, when I got a bit older and more mature with my boxing, you realise that it's about when you choose to punch and what shots you're going to use, your shot selection, etc. And Khan I don't think he's ever really had that. And last night he was lunging in. I thought he looked quite shockingly bad, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't mean that as disrespect to Amir, who I think is a nice fella. I've met him a few times. I've interviewed him one time, so over the course of a dinner for a public audience. So I got to build a rapport with him over about an hour in that particular period, and I do like him. And he can be. I mean, I thought he looked absolutely awesome the night he beat Marcus Madana. I think it was 2011. It was going back a little while now, but I thought he looked almost superhuman that night. So he's been an exciting fighter and he has done a lot. But I thought last night he just looked so. My comments I made was while it's going on Facebook, I just said Brook looks just so much better and more solid. Almost shockingly so, because you tended to think before the fight people were saying which one of them is a more shot. That's what it'll come down to. Who's got the most left? And you look at the gulf in in the form and performance of last night. It was like night and day. One of them literally had that one fight too many. Although, like I say, you've always got to weigh in the revenue that he got for it. And Brook looked almost reborn again, didn't he? Which I wouldn't be fooled by that, by the way. I think Brook was the level you've seen Brook at. On the flip side of that is the level he's at today. But Khan just made him look so damn good.
Yeah, that's what I keep thinking about is how much of it was because Amir Khan looked so bad, or how much of it was that Kell Brook has, still got something to him and still got, he could be a good fighter. Look, they're both good fighters. They both had great careers as professional boxers, championships and whatnot. They're not, they're no mugs, but I think over time both have taken losses quite heavily to certain fighters, elite fighters, in fairness. And when it came down to it, it was just whether they were going to settle their dispute and whether it was going to be a good fight or a bad fight. And I thought it was at least entertaining to watch. As regards to what goes forward, what did you think, Ben, of what I was saying about like Conor Benn, for instance, as an example, in terms of the pluses for Conor Benn and the negatives from Kell Brook's side?
For Conor Benn, it's great. I mean, that is the blueprint, isn't it? You find a fading name who's still got name brings a lot of cachet, but he's not anywhere near as dangerous as he used to be. And then 9 times out of 10, youth wins. That's what happens. I think Conor Benn would beat Kell Brook now. I know Kell Brook looked great last night, but I think Conor is a good, hungry young fighter, as you said. He's got that self-belief. He doesn't know what it feels like to lose. And Conor is a little better than I thought he was going to be, a few years ago. I admit that. So I don't think Conor Benn is the second coming of Ray Robinson, but I do think he would beat Kell Brook more than likely. I mean, depends on the weight as well, right? Because last night was made at 149 pounds. There was a lot of talk about Kell. Maybe he wouldn't even make the weight and might just pay the fine, 100 grand every pound. He might be over. He even suggested that himself. Turns out he did make the weight. Came in underneath. He didn't want to pay 100 large for any kind of penalty or more. So, if he fights Conor Benn, who is comfortable at welterweight, he's a natural, young welterweight right now who can make 147 for championship fights. Would they make that at a catch weight of a similar? Would it be the same 149, or would it even be? Would Kell want a little bit more comfort, and would he say, "I want it to be closer to light middleweight if you want to fight me"? So I don't know, but anywhere near welterweight, I would expect Conor Benn to win. So it's a great fight for him, and I think it's the Conor Benn blueprint of fighting guys who've got name value but aren't quite what they were. And I think that because of the way Kell won last night, there's a lot of money for that fight right now. Especially you imagine with Eddie Hearn promoting it as he would be. The negatives for Kell Brook, I don't think it really brings anything to the table except money for him, which we should never underestimate the lure of that and the usefulness of it. As I say, I would like to see Kell retire, but that's me just, as an outsider, just looking on the situation, thinking, wouldn't it be nice for his legacy if he just walked away now? Because that'd just be such a, the final taste he would have of his career would be triumph, satisfaction, and closure. For Conor Benn, I mean, if suppose he comes and beats Conor Benn, I mean, he's upset the apple cart, and I guess Kell Brook has got another big fight then, hasn't he? He's living some kind of a renaissance to his career then.
Yeah.
But I think mainly it's about money for Brook, whereas for Conor Benn, it represents a good stepping stone, really.
Yeah, Conor Benn is trying, like you say, it's almost like the blueprint to what he's doing. And in some ways, I'm kind of interested in that fight, but from the other side, I agree with pretty much everything you've said about Kell Brook, and I think last night is the perfect way for him to walk away with his head held high. He can be, he's put to bed this rivalry.
Yeah.
But Danny, we don't always see fighters do what we as fans, pundits, whatever you want to say, think they should do.
No, I think we do see this in MMA, don't we, where fighters can't let go. But I think a lot less so than you do in boxing. I think boxing, you see careers going on way beyond their need to, really.
Well, look at some of the fights we've seen in the last 12 months or so.
They just find it very, very hard to let go. I mean, if you're going to see it at all in the MMA side of things, it's more in the light heavyweight and heavyweight. You will see fighters continuing to be of some sort of effect in their 40s. But yeah, in boxing, it's just such a known fact, isn't it, that fighters sometimes have several years at the ring, seemingly retired, and then come out of retirement time and time again. Who knows with Cobra? I mean, when you get a win, sometimes it just gives you that little buzz that you just want to experience it again. And then when you lose, you want to finish with a win. It's one of those little catch-22s.
So basically, what it means is you want to fight again no matter what, whatever the scenario.
Yeah, it's always in you. I mean, I can only take it from my point of view. I felt it in myself. It was just time, and so for me, it was not a questionable thing. It wasn't something I had to ponder on. It just hit me all of a sudden when I was actually training to prepare to maybe take a fight again. And I was like, I'm not enjoying doing this. And that was it for me. And I thought, you know what? I've sacrificed over a decade of my life to this sport, which I've utterly enjoyed. And right now I'm not enjoying it. And I just wanted to change the way I did things. But we're all different, right?
That's what Kevin Mitchell said when he was training with Tony Sims for what he thought was another fight. Still a big name, still money on the table. And he suddenly... He was hitting pads or something or running, and he said, "I don't fancy this." He just suddenly thought, "I don't fancy this," and he said that he could tell that the coach knew as well as he was on the pads on this particular day. And he said he had a word with him afterwards, and he said he already knew what I was going to tell him. So,
right.
I think as well, combat sports is one of those things, and either MMA or boxing, you can't do it half-hearted. So if there's any doubt whether you think you can still do it, you kind of gotta put it away
at certain levels. Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah,
you've got to be all in.
As a professional, I mean, like when you're genuinely putting your life on the line, you get caught wrong and stuff. Interesting. Rob Boyle says, "I'm glad the fight was cut and dried, so there was no risk of a rematch." Having said that, he thought it was a decent fight on what I thought was a pretty poor undercard. What did you think of the undercard, Ben?
It wasn't good, was it? And I think, as one of my friends said, this show desperately needs a fight to break out. He said because they were all showcases. I mean, that Adam Azim looks really good. He looks like a kind of, obviously, there's similarities stylistically, influence-wise with Prince Nassim Hamed. His brother also boxed on the show and looked okay. You got the debut of Fraser Clark, who boxed. Fraser Clark boxed a guy. Can't remember his name already, but he boxed that, aesthetically not too impressive white heavyweight that he fought. Okay. And that guy had actually asked his manager, because he's only just turned pro. He's literally, I think it was his debut, wasn't it? I think it was his debut as well. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was possibly his debut as well as it being Fraser Clark's debut. Okay. But in any case, he'd asked his manager, is there any way you could get me a ticket for the Khan Brook fight? Any chance you can do anything? And he asked him this on a Wednesday. Then on the Thursday this week, he said to him, "I've got you a ticket." He said, "But you've got to fight Fraser Clark as well." So basically, he says, "I've got you into the fight, mate, but here's the deal." And he just stepped up and did it. And it's funny because I know people on Facebook who are involved with this guy from the same gym, and they said, fair play to him, he's stepping up. And they were saying, his mate said, I doubt he'll get out the first round, but you've got to hand it to him. And they were saying that before the fight. And as you know, he didn't get out the first round. So that wasn't a great spectacle, but you can't really, that Fraser Clark is entitled to that kind of pro debut. He's allowed to have that. He won't be the first, and he wasn't the first, he won't be the last. Great interference there.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's the wind outside, right outside my house. Is like battering the windows at the moment.
Yeah, you got Natasha Jonas, who obviously I think her opponent was pretty bad, considering it was a vacant world title fight. I mean, for Natasha, it's great that she's third time lucky she wins a world title. It's kind of it's a defining moment for her. I don't think people who contest world title fights call me crazy, but I don't think they should be utterly unheard of and semi-competent. I just don't think that should happen. But I mean, having said that, I don't follow women's boxing as acutely as I do the male game. Yeah. So I don't know what that woman's form was prior to last night, and it may be that she has performed better than she looked against Natasha, who nailed her early doors. In any case, but no, I mean, I think probably the highlight of the undercard, well, for me, was I've got Jermaine Brown, who won the English title. The vacant English super title. He's trained by a couple of friends of mine called Adam Martin and Mick Guilfoyle. Lovely people. They work at the same gym as Adam Booth in Red Hill, I believe it is. And it's called the Boxing Booth, the gym. Mm-hmm. And they've got quite an exciting thing going on there. And it was great to see. It was great to see friends do well. I haven't met the fighter yet, but he seems like a great kid. And I think that was probably the most credible moment on the undercard. And from a personal point of view, I thought it was, it was my favourite bit. But no, other than that, it was. A lot of people were saying, "How can you charge pay-per-view for this?" It was. It's a good job the main event didn't disappoint really, and that a lot of people went away happy and feeling good about that. Because other than that, if Khan and Brook had been a farce, like imagine it had even been some, like old fighters sometimes get dislocations. Like you remember when Nigel Benn twisted his ankle against Steve Collins, something like that. Imagine that scenario, and it would have been one of the worst shows in living memory, wouldn't it? I think Yeah. It's
when you think that 2 weeks ago we had the Eubank versus Williams card, which actually was it was just on normal Sky Sports, but it was actually a really enjoyable card to watch from pretty much start to finish. Yeah, and then you have this on a pay-per-view, which is effectively a one-fight card, and like you say, they're probably lucky in some ways that the main fight did. It came off, should we say?
I think it came off, and I think it did because we got a stoppage and we got that sense of closure. Yes. I'll stress again, I don't think it was a great fight by any grander sense at all. But at least it was dramatic, and it provided a completely emphatic conclusion, so people could walk away feeling kind of buzzed about that. And also, I think rightly or wrongly, they feel buzzed about what Kell Brook might do now as well.
So I saw Ben. It says old man Amir Khan considers retirement after loss to Kell Brook. Now, surely he isn't going to carry on, is he? Because wasn't he semi-retired anyway before this fight, really?
I don't know. He never said he was retired, so I never took him to be retired. I mean, he hadn't boxed in a long time, that's for sure. He hadn't boxed since he fought Billy Dibb, didn't he, in 2019 at some point in Saudi Arabia? Yeah, that was his last one. Yeah, that was an easy fight, right? It was against a former featherweight. He was always going to walk through him. So I didn't think he was retired really, but I suppose he was contemplating retirement, and then he thought, well, the only fight that I would stay around for is Kell Brook, and and that, as it happened, they ended up reaching an agreement, and they went ahead and did it. I don't like to use cliches, but I do not see where Amir Khan has got left to go. I think he'd be being very self-delusional if he continued and said, when fighters sometimes give themselves that speech and then they turn it on the world, that they say, that wasn't me in there. I need to put this right for myself. I was cutting corners, etc. I know I'm better than that, and they want to do it again because they can't, because they just don't want to go out like that. But I think Khan, he's got nothing to prove to anybody. He has had a fantastic career. He's earned colossal amounts of money, and he's made history. He can walk away as a British boxing great, not an all-time great. He's not that, but I think he's done extremely well, and like I say, I think people will remember Amir Khan for excitement and big fights, and the fact that he always wore his heart on his sleeve. And like I said before, he's always had big balls. He fought top guys. Yeah. And so I don't see why Khan would. I don't see the percentage in him continuing.
No, and you hit the nail on the head. He has got nothing to prove, and I think this kind of speech you mentioned there is one thing if a 20-something fight, 25-year-old fighter who's coming off a loss, who everyone thought they were going to win, and they give themselves that kind of speech of, I'm better than that, I need to go away and do this and that. But when you're in this position, I think it's different, isn't it? And I think, like Donna says, he can retire and he can go and do Strictly Come Dancing.
He totally can. And that's the sort of thing I would fully expect to see him turn up on. And I mean, Khan can be a celebrity in this country. He's earned that kind of position, really. It's a hard career, isn't it? I mean, Did
he do I'm a Celebrity? Am I misremembering that?
I think he did something like that. He's definitely done something along those lines, hasn't he?
They were in the chat.
Yeah.
Donna says, yep, and he was a wimp. So
he was a right wimp, yeah. Well.
There we go. So Ben, we're not too pushed for time actually. So there's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. What do you think is next for Canelo Alvarez in terms of his next title defense?
Right. People were talking about two different deals. There was a deal from PBC, Al Heyman, two-fight deal on the table to fight Jamal Charlo. Mm-hmm. Right, I do get them mixed up, Jamal Charlo.
Yeah,
I mean that is some kind of, the parents have got a lot to answer for there. One of them is a middleweight, and the other one is a light middleweight. Okay, the Charlo brothers from Texas, both very talented guys. It was to fight Charlo and David Benavidez. David Benavidez is like the quiet, unsung man, super middleweight. A lot of people have been saying for years that he's the man and he's the one guy that poses a genuine threat to Canelo. But his PR is relatively low key and off the radar, and he's also suffered, inactivity and fits and starts in his career. But Al Heyman, who's very, rather mysterious figure himself. Does anybody actually know what he looks like? They do, of course, but he is quite mysterious. I know that sometimes people have mistaken him for other entities in the world of professional boxing, but he supposedly offered Canelo a two-fight deal, and it was Charlo and Benavidez, yeah? And actually people were saying that that was the deal. That was one of the deals on the table. The other one was from Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, DAZN, etc. That was to fight Dimitri Bivol, who is I believe he's the WBA light heavyweight champion. It's hard. He could be the WBO. I ought to know. Apologies for that. But Bivol holds one of the belts. I believe it's a WBA belt, a light heavyweight. I hope that I'm making a point by even being confused about it momentarily, the way boxing is today. To fight him, right? And then for a trilogy with Gennady Golovkin. That was the deal on the table from Hearn, DAZN, etc. Okay. And the other day, it was announced on Twitter that he'd accepted the fight with Bivol, the two-fight deal with Bivol, and then with Golovkin, the trilogy. Then Canelo tweeted, "I haven't agreed to anything. We are negotiating. So why are these sources always claim?" He said, "Don't believe anything till you hear it from me." So he put the kibosh on that particular source, and announced it. It came from a very credible source as well, Mike Copinger, who's on Twitter for boxing, works for ESPN, and is almost always right. But he's not infallible. And Canelo said, "No, have I heck." So
one of the names which you didn't mention, who I've seen linked with him this week, at least in certain places, is John Ryder, on the back of a big performance, big victory last week, wasn't it? Against Daniel Jacobs. A bit of a shock, that one.
Well, I don't know if it was the idea of Ryder winning wasn't a shock, but I think it was probably, the decision was controversial, wasn't it? A lot of people think that Jacobs was the rightful winner of that fight, should have got the decision.
From what I saw, he dominated, I think the first 5 or 6
rounds. Yeah, he did.
So I think it's very difficult to come back from that, isn't it? I mean, Ryder certainly came on big time in the second half of the fight. You know what? I didn't score it round by round. That's why I don't have an absolute opinion on it. But I think he was probably a bit unlucky, Danny Jacobs. If I scored it, I would expect to find it for Jacobs by a round or something like that. But John came back very well. I'd like to see John Ryder get a shot at Canelo. Sure, I would love to see that, because I don't know if you know this, but when I got back from New York in 2003,
I'd found my way back into boxing again after walking quite a circuitous path in life for many years before that. And because I've been training in Gleason's gym in New York, and I'd had a fight out there against a guy who ended up boxing Danny Jacobs a little bit later, by the way, but that's kind of neither here nor there related to this story. But so I wanted a gym to stay close to boxing, somewhere that I could continue that journey with, and maybe have a few more amateur fights and stuff, and maybe get involved in coaching. And I went to the Angel ABC because I was living with a girlfriend at the time who lived in Clerkenwell. And when the first night I joined up as a kind of, they basically said I was going to come to them as a coach, but that I could box another season until I hit the upper age limit with them as well. And the first night, the kid that stood out for me, I'm looking at the kind of flock that they had at the time, was a 15-year-old called John Ryder. He was a southpaw. He didn't have any bouts, but he looked, there was something about him that stood out compared to the rest of the kids at the time. They were all novices. And he was obviously very keen and very dedicated. And we did a lot of sparring between the ages of 15, him being 15 and 17. I boxed on the show the night he made his amateur debut when he lost to some Greek kid from the All Stars Amateur Boxing Club up on Harrow Road. And so I watched his journey from the start. And I remember I did actually say to him, who knows, you could be a super middleweight champ of the world one day. And he came perilously close to that, didn't he? I mean, he was a chunky kind of 15-year-old, so I guessed the weight correctly as well. But I would love to see. I mean, John should have got the decision against Paul Smith a couple of years ago. What was that, 2019, I believe, at this point? Might have been 2020. But he certainly should have gotten the decision that night. So, by rights, he should have already been a world title holder, John. I wouldn't expect him to beat Canelo, but it would be great to see him get that massive, life-changing money.
Of course,
one thing, with John is he wouldn't dog it or anything like that. He would give it his best effort, and I think it'd be interesting. Whether he's going to get that or not, I don't know. I mean, it was a final eliminator, so I believe with Jacobs. So there's leverage.
It was an eliminator. I think the thing for me before there's a question just from the chat, which I'm going to put to you in a minute. Because it was somewhat controversial, I wonder whether they might run that back before a Canelo fight. But I think we'll see. You don't think they'll run that back, even though it was that?
You don't. Yeah. Well, when you narrowly beat some guy, particularly if it was a world title eliminator, providing the stepping stone to a bigger fight, you don't say, let's do it again and see if he can definitely beat me this time. You just say, well, shucks, that's the decision. I'm not the judges. Sorry about that, but we move on. But you don't run it back. You don't do that. I don't see any wisdom in that at all.
Okay. Smog on the Time says, John Ryder was lucky for me. It's the reason that the top American fighters don't come over here to fight. Do you think there's any validity in that?
I think it's pretty bad in the UK for hometown decisions. Yeah, I think we're every bit as bad as the countries we traditionally used to complain about in Europe, like Italy and Germany were always the favourite, the whipping boys. We'd say you have to knock them out over there to get a draw, etc. I think the UK is pretty bad, but here's the spanner in the works of that logic. The British judge voted for Danny Jacobs and the American judge voted for John Ryder. There's also this perception, age-old perception, that American judges tend to traditionally favour favoured aggression more on a default basis, whereas British judges, English judges supposedly like to see a little bit more of the kind of noble art of boxing unfolding. So I don't know if it is that simple. You know what? If you wanted to get really deep about it, you could say, okay, but if these things are really fixed and rigged in a really cynical way, then the way you would probably mask it is say to the American, right, you go for the other guy, and then you go for the Brits. But I don't believe it's that kind of level of skullduggery, to be honest with you. And I feel I've had enough experience to make a judgment on that. But you can say that it's bad, and it is bad. And I can understand why. I know Roy Jones certainly in his pomp years never wanted to come to Britain to fight anybody like Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn, Joe Calzaghe, anybody. He said because he didn't believe he'd get a fair shake over there. And Roy Jones, by the way, was still smarting from getting robbed in the Olympic final in South Korea at that time. So it wasn't Britain necessarily. He was just suspicious of going anywhere that wasn't a good old US of A.
But it's funny. Ben, sorry to interrupt you, mate. It's funny, and I'll put this to you, Dan. Actually, we've talked about numerous times, Danny, about British fighters going to America and not always feeling the perception of them not getting a fair shake from the judges. So you've always got to finish the fight conclusively to be sure. And obviously, there seems to be an opposite feeling with the American fighters to come here. It's a shame, really. You just judges judge it properly. Like Danny, we've talked about that a few times.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I think it's a natural thing to think when you're fighting in someone else's own turf, I guess. Yeah. I think that's always going to be something going about. I think the country, from my experiences, has always been fighting out in Japan. Now, that was always seemingly very, very biased judging. Japan was terrible. That's just on my sort of take on my experiences personally, and with other people quite close to me in the fighting world that have fought and competed over there. Whether it's like that still now, who knows? I don't know. I'm the decade and more out of the sport, going over that ways. But yeah, I just think this is a natural thing to think. And like Ben says, you could look into it a lot more deeper, and you might perhaps see some stats that actually rule against that way of thinking.
With boxing, I think it's more about the bigger commercial animal than it is. Yes, national patriotism is a factor, and it's certainly a factor at the lower levels. In the amateurs, you box someone on his show, you tend to lose. You get it on your show, you got a better chance of winning. That is all true. In the Eurovision Song Contest, you see it all the time. That same principle. But with boxing, I think the bigger commercial animal makes a difference. If you look at David Haye, he won his title against Nikolai Valuev, the WBA Heavyweight Championship, back in, was it 2010, 2009? And he was away boxing in the other guy's backyard because he was German-based, Valuev. And Haye threw about 6 punches around and still got the decision, because I think he was the bigger commercial animal. And I think the powers that be wanted Haye to win that title because he was so much more marketable than the great big ugly Russian freak show, who I think they'd already milked that market value out of him. So I think sometimes it does depend. It's about the connections. Ryder is better connected than Jacobs with Eddie Hearn, who's massive power broker in boxing at this point in 2022. So I don't know that it's always about, particularly when I just said, look, Danny picked up on it, the American judge ended up voting for the Brit, and then the British judge voting for the American. I think, like Barry Hearn said to me a while ago, when Canelo Alvarez beat Erislandy Lara, when everybody thought he'd lost the fight, he said there's this natural tendency to veer towards the bigger commercial animal, and that's what drives boxing more than anything else.
Interesting. So there's another really good point and question I want to kind of put to you, Ben, in a minute before we let you go. But I just watched a little 2-minute interview with Sky Sports Boxing put on Twitter of Amir Khan. He says Kell Brook was the best man of tonight, but he also said his love of boxing is just not there anymore. That to me sounds like a guy who's done, doesn't it? When, like we just talked 15-20 minutes ago about if you haven't got the motivation and the love for doing it and getting up to those early mornings and the training, if you're not fully invested in it, you can't do it, can you, at that level? So that sounds like a man who's done, doesn't it?
It really does sound like the preempting his retirement speech, which is, I think it makes sense as well, so I expect that announcement imminently.
Indeed. Smog on the Tyne said, we did touch on this a little bit, but just because he's asked, I'll put it to you, Ben. He said, what did you think of the Sky's pay-per-view undercard last night? For me, it was terrible. If Fast Card put that on, he would have been run out of town.
Yeah, well, Eddie. That's what people were saying. That's what people were saying on my page. They were saying Eddie would get absolutely slated for this. And I think it's true, I think there were too many showcases, I would say. That's the thing. You're going to get showcases, and you're not going to get 50-50 fights right across the card. It doesn't work that way. Although I believe in the UFC, I believe they can do it like that, or in the MMA world at large, I believe that is more of a sustainable model. They tell me, because people are saying boxing is behind and needs to get with the program, in that sense. But the way things are right now, you can't have competitive fights all across the card. You will have a few showcases, like obviously the Fraser Clark thing and the Adam Azim thing. But you need a couple of quality fights to make customers, either live gate customers or pay-per-view customers alike. You need a couple of good fights, truly good fights that people can get their teeth into and feel that they weren't ripped off, because people were saying, this is why people stream it, isn't it? Everybody knows big fight night, social media, it's all a wash.
Sorry, Ben, how much was last night's pay-per-view?
20 quid, I believe. But people stream it, don't they? Like I say, anybody got a link. Anybody got any links, guys? And what people say when they get an undercard like that, they say, no wonder we all stream it.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? I know 20 quid doesn't sound a lot, but if you're a fight fan who wants to watch every card, say, that the UFC puts on, or every boxing on a Saturday night, you like to watch, whatever card's available. If every other week is 20 quid, it soon totals up, doesn't it? To like 40, 50, 60 quid a month. And not everybody in the current climate can afford to just chuck that down on boxing. And I know people will say, oh, you want to support the fighters and this, and you want things to, but it's not as simple as that. And I think to a certain extent, promoters have to understand, like, to me, that card last night should have been on Sky Sports. Simply
I agree with
because
you. I think your
the
comparison
card was not a pay-per-view card in any way.
Your comparison with the Williams Eubank thing, it was a valid one. I think on that basis, it would have been okay. But do you know what? The thing is, Simon, they couldn't have paid Khan and Brook the money they needed to fight each other if they didn't have it on pay-per-view.
Oh, yeah,
they literally couldn't have paid those wages, It was like, if you want to see Khan Brook still, and everybody did, then it has to be pay-per-view. Otherwise, we can't afford them,
It's interesting, though, isn't it, Ben? Because what did we say? I think it was 3 weeks ago when you said, I'm almost considering not watching it to make a point. But like, we all knew we were going to watch it and we were going to talk about it, of course. But like, it's one of those things, wasn't it? Right, Ben, we're going to talk a bit of MMA now. So we'll let you go. I appreciate you giving us a bit of extra time. Appreciate you switching your time around as well, of course. As always, it is a great pleasure, my friend. And I'm sure we'll see you very soon.
No doubt. Thanks, guys.
Cheers,
Cheers,
mate.
Thank you.
So, Danny, me and you are going to talk a bit of MMA now. There's lots to talk about, indeed. I'm really, really gutted. Chris is really apologetic that he can't make it. But, it is what it is. We knew there was a problem with his travel. I did try and I messaged a couple of people because I know they've got some stuff to say, but unfortunately, it's late notice now, isn't it? So me and you will talk some UFC and MMA for it. In some ways it's good because there's some Bellator fights to preview, which I want to talk about, like Brett Johns. We've got some Cage Warriors fights in UFC London, and we can perhaps dig our teeth in a little bit. And we'll finish a bit earlier as well, which is always nice now and again. But before we do that, I just want to take a moment to talk about our sponsors, or one of our sponsors for this evening, in manscaped.com. The Danny Batten Show is proudly supported by Manscaped. They've just launched their fourth generation performance package. This ultimate package includes the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard it right, the 4.0. Manscaped, the leaders in male grooming, have done it again, and they make you take your grooming to the next level. And you can join over 4 million men and women worldwide who trust Manscaped with the new Performance Package 4.0 by going to manscaped.com. 20% off and free shipping simply by using the code ACE Nation. As always, supporting our sponsors and our brand partners really helps us out. Cannot tell you how much that helps us out. And as I've said before, we won't just push any old stuff with you. We'll only push stuff we have used ourselves, only use stuff that we recommend because of the quality of it. And Manscaped certainly has the quality, whether it's the boxer shorts, which are literally top drawer. Even the box shorts feature that sort of top drawer technology. They're made to be breathable, stretchy, exceptionally good for if you're athletic or you do any sort of training, whether it be in the gym or in combat sports. And of course, you have the Lawnmower 4.0, which is the trimmer. I've used that myself. I know Danny's used it. It's exceptional. It's got a 7,000 RPM motor, multifunction, turns it on and off. It's got a torch, helps you get some precision if you're shaving your chest, your bits, your beard, whatever it may be. Precision is what you need. No nicks or snags or anything like that. There's a reason why they're leaders in below the waist grooming, and that is it. We've just had Valentine's Day, of course. There's all sorts of gifts on their website. You've got the Shed travel bag, the anti-chafing boxer shorts, as I mentioned. You also get the Weed Whacker, which is the one I want to get next, the nose and hair trimmer, because nobody wants to see hairs come out your nose, your face, or whatever, your nose and your ears. And as I've talked about before, very quickly, They sent this thing called the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and Crop Reviver Ball Toner. And what a life-changing experience that is. Something which is just why your private parts are they're the most important part of your body. Why wouldn't you look after them as well as you look after every other part of your body? And the equipment and the things that Manscaped provide allow you to do that. And that's, it's not all about those bits. You can get cologne and all sorts of stuff. Manscaped.com. See all the stuff that they have on offer. Your lady will thank you. Your man will thank you. Go to manscaped.com. Exclusive to our viewers. Use the code ACE Nation, 20% off and free shipping. We thank them for sponsoring the show as ever. Danny Batten, manscaped.com.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I know I always say it, but it's those boxers that done it for me.
And they were the game changer.
They're special. They're special.
Well, funny enough, my missus ordered me some stuff from Violet Money yesterday on Friday, so I'm waiting for that to come, and that includes some boxers. So hopefully they'll be as good, but I'm sure they will be. I've heard good things about their equipment and their clothes, so I'm looking forward to that. And they're sending us some t-shirts as well, so we should get them sometime soon.
Good stuff,
but, mate. The MMA's been busy. So we'll have a quick chat about last night. The one which really sticks out for me is the main event where you had Jamahal Hill defeated Johnny Walker. Jamahal Hill is on a bit of a tear. He's looked super impressive. He was the ranked 12 fighter fighting Johnny Walker, who up until yesterday I thought had really made improvements after, because he came in. He beat a couple of guys, or a few guys, on the bounce impressively, looked exciting with the kicks and everything. And then all of a sudden, he just got stopped when he came up against someone with a bit of, real quality. And, there was something weird about Johnny Walker's performance in some ways. He just didn't look himself. And I think even the punch which finished him, mate, it hit like on the forehead and the side of his head.
It was a strange one. The way he went down was really strange. He was knocked out on the feet, literally, wasn't he?
Yeah,
he sort of like planked out. Seeing such a tall man go rigid and straight and then sort of like fall down was something you don't see very, very often. But yeah, it was a nasty one. He took a few nasty shots thereafter as well before the ref could, intervene and stop it outright. Johnny Walker's struggling. I think he's struggling. I think he's still under John Kavanagh, isn't he?
Yeah, he moved to John Kavanagh, and that was when he moved to John Kavanagh was when those improvements began to. And you could really see them.
He did make improvements. I think he's just struggling to be instinctual, which is perhaps what led him to some of his successes early on, albeit that he was just kind of a little bit too crazy, a little bit too rushed, but he did get results from it. But then also consequently got him found out a little bit, and he had to do something different than just going on there full bore. I think the difficulty perhaps that he's having with this camp change is that John Cameron is very, very strategical, tactical, and perhaps making Walker too conscious of everything that he's doing in there. I didn't like what he was doing when he was switching, sort of all the way he was switching stance. I'm a big fan of switching your stance. It makes a big diversity of the way you can approach your attacks and the way you defend and therefore counter and so on, and also makes it a little more awkward, or a lot more awkward in fact, to being set up for a takedown by switching your stance, particularly in retraction. But he does it in such an awkward way, kind of turns sideways, he crosses his feet, so he's still doing some, what I would say is fundamentally wrong things. I don't know. He just looks like he's thinking about everything he's doing, or not even thinking about it. It's like he's listening for instruction from his corner and trying to act on it in the literal sense, and perhaps not going in there doing what feels right for him. I think he has to find that balance, really. Yes, go to another camp that perhaps is more tactical in its approach and take that on board in some way. But still, you're the fighter in there. A lot of the times I say to my fighters, listen, all we can do in the corner is feed you some ideas. Yes, you can do some proper tactical and strategical changes in between rounds, but largely within the round, we can only but suggest ideas to improve what might be weak, and suggest ideas of maybe, coming up with a different way of attacking if things ain't working there. You can feed those sort of suggestions in. But largely, the fighter's got to feel whether that's the right thing to do or not. And I just don't think Johnny Walker has that kind of perhaps IQ or maturity yet. I'm not too sure whether it's just an IQ thing or, not to say he's a dumb guy. I'm not talking about the specific sport that he's in. Yeah, the fight IQ. And I'm not too sure whether perhaps he can, make that work in any given level that's going to put these wrongs right. Or, I don't know. It's something amiss. It's definitely something amiss.
He's lost 2 fights in a row. He's now lost 4 of his past 5. So he does need, and 3 with straight first round knockouts. So I think, there's something to be, to be addressed. I also would say, he released a statement. He said, I'm fine. On to the next one. Thank you for all the love. He loves this sport. You win some, you lose some, basically, but I will never give up. Jamahal Hill, let's talk about him. Because I think he deserves a tremendous amount of credit. He's been on a tear. He's been looking very, very good. I'd argue I saw some people getting a bit ahead of themselves in terms of where they think he should go next on social media, which you always going to get. Especially after like an impressive knockout. I don't think he's been fully tested yet by someone who is genuine. I know he beat Jimmy Crute, and Jimmy Crute we've talked about before, in detail. When he came up against Paul Craig, he lost. He beat Ovin St. Preux. So, he's beaten some guys, He's not just beating, newcomers or kind of guys on the upcome. He has beaten those guys on the way, but he beat Ovin St. Preux, he beat Jimmy Crute, and now he's beating Johnny Walker. Those are 3 very credible names on your journey to trying to get, a title shot or get into that top 3 or 4. But when he did face someone who's right up there now in Paul Craig, he did get finished. So, but then, like I say, he's had a couple of fights since then and won them comfortably. So maybe he's addressed anything which was, a problem. And look, I thought he was super impressive last night, I got to say.
Yeah. No, I agree. He's been looking impressive time again. And that fight with Paul Craig fought absolutely out of his skin.
Yes, he did.
It was an absolute incredible performance. It really was. It's the best we've ever seen him. So, we can.
And he's gone on to special things after that.
Yes, he has.
That fight kick-started his current sort of.
Yeah. He's really doing some great things. So, perhaps we shouldn't be too harsh on him. And I think that he could be every bit as big as the hype. And, of course, people are really excited about this young man coming up through. And look, he's pretty big at the weight as well. He's standing 6'4". He's a big dude at the weight. Powerful, scary. He's getting the job done. He's putting people away. And I imagine a lot of people in that top 10 are sitting up taking note and going to be a little bit wary about having to face this individual because, he's doing all the things right and all the things to be expected of someone that wants to break in to not only that top 10, but that top 5, which is all important if you want to start becoming a serious contender in that division.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm just looking at the comment. Like, I thought Paul Craig had moved up the rankings a bit more than he has. He's actually only 1 ranking. He's between Johnny Walker and Jamahal Hill. So there's a chance, I suppose, that Jamahal Hill can go above Paul Craig maybe with this victory, which is interesting.
Possibly so, yeah.
Paul Craig's on a 4-fight win streak by knockouts as well. He's got a massive fight coming up against Nikita Krylov at UFC London. So, maybe after that, we might see them go up against each other again. You never know.
That's a fight. I'd actually be interested to see that fight be run off again. But I think it would be a shame to spoil any of their, the pair of their trajectory sort of thing moving up through.
Yeah, it'd almost be like to see them when they both get to sort of 1 and 2, wouldn't you? Like,
I'll certainly, perhaps if they have to have a fight off to be a contender for the title, perhaps I would want to see that sort of return fight between them both. But as a fan, I think it will always be a really good matchup second time around, particularly as they've already fought each other, so they know more about what each other is going to be like like in there. It'd be interesting to see what kind of adjustments they'll make regards their camp preparing them. That'd be really, really interesting. I think it could be a very, very different fight from their first time around. In which way, who knows? But that's why I'd be interested to see it second time around. I just think it'd be very, very different. I think it's going to be a lot of the skill of the camp on how well they know their fighter to implement tactics and strategy to try and figure ways to a win again in the form of Paul Craig and not losing and finding a way to win this time around with Jamil Hill. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that I get really interested in. Sometimes I'm not just interested in fighter and fighter. There's a lot of underlying things from a coach's perspective that I'm interested in, like how's that camp going to adjust that fighter. It's all very well just thinking about the fighter, but there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that pushes changes in a fighter, particularly when they're facing someone they fought before. So that's something that really, really interests me. But I think the well-placed position of that return fight would be perhaps to have a fight off for contendership for that title, which I both think that with the kind of trajectory they're getting, they really, really could climb up to that position together.
Yes, absolutely. They're both looking good as well, which is interesting. Anything on the prelims from the UFC card that caught your eye, mate?
No, I don't really touch too much on that sort of. So
we had Joaquin Buckley defeated Abdul Razak Al Hassan via a split decision for the opening fight. What did you make of Joaquin Buckley's performance?
Yeah, Buckley was very, very impressive. The kind of footwork that he was showing, the diversity of his attacks and his wrestling were really, really on point. It seems that he can actually portray different styles to fit the particular opponent that he's up against. He really, really did show a lot of changes from previous fights, and that's really exciting to see. Because he was using a lot of movements, you did see a couple of times that he was starting to blow, particularly in that last round. He's kind of gassing a little bit. But look, he put a lot of effort into takedowns that both were successful and unfortunately fouled. And that Al Hassan, he's a devastating striker. And it really could have been a different decision had he just set up that power a little bit more instead of just throw the power bombs. He just didn't prep it up. There was a brief moment where Hassan sat behind a kick, he kicked at the leg, and I was like, okay, this is good. He's listening to his corner. And then he sat behind a jab before he punched hard, but then went back into maybe panicking that he might get taken down time and time again, as that did continually happen throughout the whole fight. The threat of takedown was always there. He just kept overthrowing, so much so that when he was in a grappling exchange where he was in a really dominant position, throwing some ground and pound from a top position, he overswung and totally lost balance and allowed his Hassan to stand up. Buckley to stand up. So he's got so much potential, really, really has. But he's like it's just like a lion that gets out the cage. If it ain't under control, it can either do a lot of damage or, go wandering off and not doing the right thing. And I felt like he just went wandering off, just not doing the right thing. I felt like he was just a little out of control and disconnected from his cornerman. His cornerman must have been going absolutely nuts. But he was always in the fight because of that power, right? I don't know if you felt that. Was it one that you watched closely yourself? Or
I only saw the highlights of this one, yeah.
Only highlights of it. Yeah, I mean... That was it made it interesting to watch because that any one of those punches, if it landed, could have ended the fight. And I think that's what kept me on the edge of the seat watching it at all times, along with the really impressive performance of Buckley himself. But it's Buckley that got the nod. I think rightly so. Al Hassan's just got to listen to his corner. Yeah.
That's a big thing, isn't it? That's part of fight IQ as well, though, isn't it? Is listening to
it is, and it's. For me, it's making use of that God-given power that he's got. Because look, not everyone hits hard; they really don't. And there is something in the way that you either got a genetic makeup or physicality that allows you to be able to hit so hard. But it's no good hitting hard if you're going to absolutely swing it and it's obvious and therefore it don't land, or you're going to get countered because you're swinging, you get ducked under and taken down, as it was time again happening to Hassan. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what kind of performances will come after this kind of performance from Hassan's side, to see whether he makes any kind of amendments and changes. And do you see the size of that guy's legs? I mean, if he just sits behind some of those kicks, I think he can do devastating work, but he relies on the hands only. And I think that's just doing him a disservice at a certain level. I think he'll always get found out unless he uses other tools before he lands those big ones.
Absolutely, mate. Next up, we had Jim Miller, defeated
Yeah.
Nicholas Motta. Oof.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Miller, I've become a fan of his really in his latter years. He just keeps getting it done, doesn't he? I know he has had losses. He's had a fair few over the total of his career, but he's also a 39th fight, isn't it, in UFC? Crazy amount of fights. But look, he's up against these young, tenacious fighters and uses his experience to find a way to win. And yeah, it's just incredible. The guy can wrestle some. He's awkward with his striking as he goes southpaw stance. And his grappling skills are all there. So he's a real all-rounded athlete and clearly dedicated because he always comes with good cardio. His chin hasn't gone by any means. It doesn't look like that he's in there with a fragile jaw and you're worried that it's like his clip is going to sort of finish his attempts in any given fight. He's every bit as good a fighter as he's always been. I think that's incredible in his latter years. And to have the sort of like the willpower to want to get fit and train and win time and time again in the sort of time of his career that he's doing now and in the weight division. I think as you go down the weights, I think that age becomes more apparent to you. But he's just got great timing, great setups. He's fully well-rounded and got that fight IQ. And I think that's why you're seeing longevity in Jim Miller. The guy just absolutely impresses me. I hope he don't go on too long, but I feel like I'm saying that prematurely because he's showing no signs of slowing down. He's doing it and he's doing it very, very well.
Yeah, he's going and going, and I think that's when you're winning, it's easy to keep going. Then we had Parker Porter defeated Alan Bordeaux via unanimous decision. I haven't seen this one, so I'll have to leave this one to you completely.
Yeah, sure.
And then we've got Carl Ducasse versus Jamie Pickett then to finish us off.
Yeah, sure. Well, I do look almost, Badot, I think that's how you say his name. He looked almost gun shy, which I suppose is easy done in that kind of weight division. Yeah, a little reluctant. I don't think he was aware of how much he was backpedaling in there. I feel Porter could have perhaps made more of this retracting, footwork that Alan was portraying in there. I think he could have perhaps pressured with more strikes, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more kicking from Porter. He did do a couple of them, and they looked really consequential. And I think that would have made more of a solid performance from him. Definitely worked hard for his takedowns. Didn't always get them, but continued to really work hard and got some successes there. Was a little clumsy, but we can perhaps be, patting Alan Badot on the back for some good takedown defense because he was entered on really, really low. It's a big height difference between the pair of them. Porter being the lot shorter one who was looking for the takedown predominantly. So he did really, really well to stay on his feet at times and work the sprawl. But I actually think Alan Badot wasn't aware of how much he's backpedaling, and we actually saw some really good stuff from him in the third round. He started really being up on his toes, actually started flicking out his shots. Okay, not huge shots, but he's flicking out the shots, which was really getting in Porter's face. And I feel like if he did that in round one, we perhaps would have had a very different fight and a very different result in that. I think Alan Badot would have won it. I just think he gave the wrong type of feeling there as a fighter as big as he is. He could have stood his ground a lot more and perhaps even pushed someone like Porter back, but he didn't do it. He was just a little gun shy, and I found that a little funny because when in that third round he was getting successes and really lightening up his footwork and flicking out those jabs and 1-2s and landing them in Porter's face, he started waving up his hands and expressing that he was feeling confident in there, but he didn't show it in his footwork. I think he was totally and utterly unaware that he was backpedaling the whole time. Now, one of the things that I think might have led to that is that I watch a lot of the coaches that are in the gym. I work very closely with them. And what I notice sometimes, not necessarily the coach's fault necessarily, although you could argue that point, is that sometimes when they're holding pads, they'll walk towards their fighter as they're receiving the particular set piece combinations that are being thrown at the pads, but they'll walk forward. It kind of like forces the fighter to therefore footwork back the whole time when they're doing pads. Or on the other hand, which is also, I feel like, wrong, is that sometimes a padsman will kind of just stand in the middle of the cage, the ring, or the matted area, and sort of like not budge from there, and then you've got a static person you're hitting against. One of the things that I'm really, really big on my personal pad work that I do is that I'll be firing back shots constantly. I'll be simulating in a leg kick, so doing appropriate defense there, and I'll even be shooting as well as doing feeds like 3 and shoot, so they're shooting in on me. I feel like he's getting pads with a padsman that may be pushing him back. I mean, this is a guessing game from me here, but this is what I feel perhaps is what's happening, that he's creating a habit within his training and backpedaling and totally unaware that he's doing it. He's got to put that right, because you can't be doing that. You can't be drawing on these heavyweight guys onto you by backpedaling in the way that he was doing. He's got the skills. We saw that briefly in that third round. I think if he starts the first round with such skills and addresses that and tries to push forward and dominate the center of that cage, I think we could see a much more improved Alain Badot. But take nothing away from Porter. He really grinded out a victory. Looked like he had made hard work of it, though. I really feel that maybe he's pushing for the takedown when it was no longer really there, and maybe overburnt out in the process. I think he could have been more efficient with those takedown attempts. But overall, fairly solid performance. I want to see Porter kick more, though.
Good stuff, mate. And then very quickly, finally, we had Carl Dicast versus Jamie Pickett.
Yeah, Carl Dicast. Wow. He's looking quite something, isn't he? He's looking very, very special. Looking composed. He looks long and rangy, sharp, powerful. He's kind of showing all the signs of someone that's going to start shaking up that division if he carries on in this trajectory. Maybe a little too soon yet, maybe to sort of jumping to conclusions of him being a champion at this stage. But I'm seeing some good things, and I'm kind of excited to see what this young man's going to be doing in that weight division. I don't know who they'll give him next. It'd be nice that they don't move him up too crazy fast. I'd like to see more of him. He's actually struck up that interest where I might go back and look at some of the other fights that he's had and try and research about him a little bit more, because I'm getting the idea that this kid could be something that will be someone that will be spoken about a lot more. I don't know. Did you see this one, or you missed out on this one?
No,
what do you think?
I thought Kyle Dicast, he's got something about him. I think just he's fascinating to watch fight. And I agree with you. He's kind of one of those guys where you look at it and you think, oh, do you know what? I would like to go back and have a look and see, see what else he's done and watch it. Just have a look in a bit of detail, really, I suppose.
Sure.
And I'm kind of interested just to see, where they go with him next, because recently they've been quite good at just hanging fire maybe on the next kind of exciting prospect. Like you look at Bryce Mitchell and how they kind of managed his career. It must have been tempting to kind of throw him up there straight away, and they've just built him quietly. But then, and even with Paddy in the UFC London card, there was talk of Cowboy Cerrone and stuff like that, and they ended up giving him a more sensible opponent, perhaps. And that's not to say that opponent's not going to be good. It's just that Cowboy Cerrone in the second fight would have been a big ask.
I want to have a look and see what's Dicast's ranking now. Have a look.
What weight are they? I've got the rank.
Let's have a look here. Have you got it up there?
I've got the rankings. What weight is he?
So is that middleweight, welterweight?
Middleweight, weren't they? I think. Let's have a look.
I'm kind of curious to see what kind of options he's got as he moves up.
Sorry, it might not be middleweight. What was let's have a look at the welters.
Middleweight.
No, he's not in the rankings, mate. So I think.
Is he not even in the rankings?
Not in the welterweight or the middleweight. And on the results as well, it says he's not in the rankings. So I mean, look, there's some big fights in that top 15 for him if he if he wants it, and if they want to push him, there's some big fights even low down in those rankings. So it really is just a case of where they want to go with him next.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
that tap
he
out
looks
as
like
well.
he's ready for a
Like,
test. Darce choke to
yeah,
finish, mate.
that's right. Yeah. I want
enjoy those.
to see what he's like when he's under a little bit of
But like even so, if they were middleweight, like you get rank 15 straight away, you got like Chris Weidman, Kevin Holland, and in the welterweights you've got top 50. So you've got Lai Jingling is 13, Jeff Neal, Chimaev, Shavrat Ramkmanov. Like, so there's some names there for them to pit him against, even in the lower rankings, which is interesting at the end of the day. Right, to finish us off, mate, very quickly, I want to talk a bit about the Bellator card that's on, I think it's next week, actually. When is it? 25th. Yeah, so is that next week? Yes, it is. So next week, from Dublin, Bellator's got a really good card. So the main event is a middleweight title match between Gerhard Mousasi and Austin Vanderford, which I think is going to be an excellent fight. And then the lightweight co-main event, Peter Quigley is back in against Kane Musa. And then you've also got Leah McCourt versus Sinead Kavanagh, which I think in Ireland, that's going to be such a good tear-up. Two Irish girls ready to go. Then you've got Brian Moore in the bantamweight division versus Janelle Lugo. And then the kind of main event of the prelims, if you like, is Brett Johns versus Kurshed Karakov. And there's a few, there's, as you'd expect, like Scott Pedersen from Shore MMA is on the prelims as well at featherweight. And as you'd expect, on these Dublin UK cards, there's a few Irish names on there as well. But there's some, it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to that card. The prelims are on YouTube, which makes it very easily to watch live because it's going to be on thing. And then obviously it's on BBC. So you can watch it on, I think it's on BBC Three. So you can watch it on BBC Three on TV, or you can just watch it on the iPlayer on devices. That's great. So we can watch that live because it'll be on a decent time as well.
Yeah.
So I was thinking we might do a little watch along, Danny, on Saturday.
That's something. Yeah, but, we could do that.
Obviously, it depends on your schedule and stuff with the gym.
Yeah.
So we could be on Saturday and Sunday. Do a little watch along but like obviously the watch along is it is what it is. We'll put it on our screens. We can't put it on the screen for everyone to watch because we'll get in trouble. So we'll watch it and we'll talk about it as it's going on and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then it gives us a little bit less to cover on Sunday as well.
Yeah.
There'll be a UFC card and stuff. But it looks exciting. It's like a UFC next week. So you've Cage Warriors is coming up fast and furious. UFC in London is coming up fast and furious. But before all that, next Sunday, we have, that Bellator card is on the Friday, not the Saturday.
Okay.
I just realized. So that's, if you want to do it, I can definitely do it on a Friday. So if you want to do a watch,
I would just have to make I'll just have to make arrangements because obviously I have more classes on then. But
if you can't, mate. But I will.
I've got a bit of notice to try to do it this week. So we'll try for it.
Let's have a look and see what time it starts. Bellator Dublin, because obviously I would have thought it starts at a decent time, but you never know, do you? They might just Bellator 25th start time. Let's have a look. Come on. What time does Bellator London start? Well, I could tell you it doesn't start at 11 a.m. So that'll be 11 a.m. Eastern. I would have thought. Right, I don't know. We'll have a look and we'll go from there. All right, 9 p.m. Eastern, which is I'll work it out and get back to you by the time. I would have thought it's on just normal Irish time. I would have thought. So next week we've got UFC Bobby Green versus Islam Makhachev in the main event at a catchweight. That is going to be interesting.
Oh, that is going to be good.
It's going to be just a fight to the end. Co-main event is Misha Sherkanov versus Wellington Tourman. I'm not particularly familiar with Wellington. Misha Sherkanov, though, is a very experienced, 34 years old, been up and down. Wellington's only 25. He's got a pretty impressive record. It's 17-5. So that's going to be really fascinating. Do you know what I find interesting, right? Wellington Tourman, age 25, his record is 17-5-0. Misha Sherkanov, who's 34, got nearly 10 years on him. His record is 15-7.
Wow.
So they've got exactly the same number of fights, but 10 years difference.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. Just seeing if there's any other interesting fights on there. There's a women's flyweight and lightweight. Nothing which really catches my eye, but those two fights on their own will make it worth watching. So yeah, there's and then the week after that is UFC 272, Covington versus Masvidal. Oh boy! Oh my gosh! Have you seen that?
Looking forward to that.
Have you seen that? Card?
I've not looked into the card too much, but I'm excited about
I'll tell
that.
You some of the fights for the UFC 272, March the 6th. You got Colby Covington versus Masvidal, Rafael Dos Anjos versus Fiziev, Edson Barboza versus Bryce Mitchell, Kevin Holland versus Alex Oliveira, and Greg Hardy versus Sergey Spivak. That's the main card.
Wow. Yeah.
Woof. Some fights.
Some bangers.
Yes, some proper fights there. And there's still Agrapova's fighting on the prelims. She's always an exciting fight to watch.
She just goes at it, doesn't she?
So this is what I was going to talk about. So Umar Nurmagomedov, brother or cousin of Khabib, I forget which one. He was supposed to fight Jack Shaw. It was all announced in March at the UFC London. And then all of a sudden it was called off and changed. I assumed he was injured because they've put that fight on, I think, twice or three times now. And then it's been pulled and Jack's had a different opponent. So for whatever reason, Umar was not able to fight Jack Shaw. However, he's now fighting a couple of weeks earlier against Brian Kelleher on the prelims of UFC 272. So it does make me wonder if he is not particularly keen to fight Jack Shaw because they made that fight a few times.
I wonder.
Or at least twice, and they just something seems to be going on with it. But then even like the fight night card after that is like Ankalov versus Thiago Santos and Marlon Moraes versus Song Yadong. Like even before we get to Volkov versus Aspinall at UFC London at the end, middle of March.
Cannot wait for that. Cannot wait for that London card. Yeah.
Volkov, Aspinall, Arnold Allen, Dan Hooker, Paddy Pimblett Vargas, Gunnar Nelson, Claudio Silva, Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Sergei Pavlovich, Paul Craig versus Nikita Krylov, and that's just the main card. Then you've got Jai Herbert versus Mike Davis, Jack Shaw versus Valiev, Molly McCann versus Carolina, Mohamed Mokaev makes his debut versus Cody Durden, Mike Grundy fights Corey McKenna, our very own friend of the show. She's also coming down to Cardiff to do a show in the studio while she's over.
Oh, wow.
He's fighting Elise Reed. Nathaniel Wood versus Ludwig Shenayalon. So that card is going to be absolutely insane. And we wish nothing but the best for all those British fighters.
Absolutely.
It's going to be insanity, that fight.
Oh, yeah.
Danny Batten will finish 4 minutes before the scheduled finish time. Chris Jenkins has messaged me back. He will be joining us next week. He sent his apologies. And of course, can't be helped. Travel, weather, etc. The Danny Batten Fight Show is powered by Violent Money. Visit www.violentmoney.co.uk for the latest training apparel, equipment, and clothes. Use the code ACE20 to get 20% off all of your orders. Big shout out to them for their help, support, and whatnot. And please do check out Violent Money Academy. We'll have some more information on that soon, including a video tour, nonetheless. So I'm really looking forward to giving that a bit of love and talking about that a little bit. And if you missed it, I put out an exclusive interview with Commonwealth champion and British title contender. He fights for the British title in next month, Mr. Gavin Gwynn on Friday. And it was a real treat. I got to spend an hour with Gav in the studio. We talked about all sorts of things, boxing generally, life. We talked about Eubank Jr. He didn't have very much very many nice words to say about him. But nevertheless, it was a really interesting interview, which has some good feedback. So check that out. If you can't wait till next Sunday for your fight content, then come and watch that because it's a good one. But until then, we bid you a farewell. Check out Manscaped, ExpressVPN, Violet Money, Away Day Apparel. Support them all. Some incredible stuff. And of course, please do check out patreon.com/Ace Podcast Nation. Join the Ace Nation army. Join the revolution and get exclusive shows, content, and rewards every week for as little as £3 a month. That is the price of a pint or a cup of coffee from Starbucks. Absolutely nothing, is it? Nothing, Danny.
Yeah,
nothing.
That's not much at all.
And you get all sorts of free stuff, and it's not free, but you know what I mean. And it keeps the channel going. But until then, we bid you farewell. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, hi.